it all depends on who you choose to be around.
Mm.
And that's the fantastic thing about being out of high school. It's fine to be that person who says, please get degrees. But if you want to be a high achiever, then you shouldn't be around those people because they'll just make you feel embarrassed for wanting to pursue something more. And the difference between school and uni on that point is that marks at high school are tangible.
So as I mentioned there, Maya, one of the interesting things that you've been a part of, particularly recently, is the new podcast you co-created with Vis called Greenfuence. And as I mentioned before, Greenfuence is all about sort of ESG, sustainability, finance, things along those lines. And you're obviously creating that with Vis, who I've known, for quite a while, dating back to high school. But obviously, me and you have met quite recently. So just to kick things off, Maya, I just wanted to get a bit of an idea of your background and your story, particularly in high school. What was your sort of experience in high school, and what was your approach for those that don't know you?
Yeah, so I was privileged to be able to go to a private school on the Lower North Shore called Winona.
Yeah.
And I would say that I've always wanted to be an all-rounder kind of person. So I was academically driven and unashamedly so, but I also wanted to build up that repertoire of interests outside of studies. So I really threw myself into a lot, particularly sport. And I've been playing tennis since I was 5. So I joined the Tilsley tennis team, and I even did basketball, gymnastics for a semester. And then I fell in love with singing, and I basically signed up for all the singing choirs that there were, did musicals and did some drama and debating, and really had the opportunity to, go and test things. And from that perspective, it's really important to be able to build that identity capital from a young age. And when I mean by identity capital, I mean being able to participate in activities which go towards the core of, finding out who you are and your values. And for me, I really found that being on the SRC and, leading the change from being the voice of the students was something that triggered some leadership qualities in me. And I wanted to explore that further down the track, as I'll mention with Webb.
Yeah.
But high school is a funny place because your whole world exists in a vacuum. All your relationships with your peers and your teachers form the world that you know, and all the drama just gets exaggerated and blown out of proportion. And so it's really difficult to separate your identity from the group. And that's, what we're fighting is that groupthink. So particularly in the last stage of high school, I said no more of this drama. I realized, I needed to be with the people that would support me and encourage me to be who I was. And, you need to develop those stronger relationships with people that don't pressure you to conform.
Yeah.
And it enables you to develop a stronger sense of self, but also develop your voice. And because high school is such a microcosm, and you'll realize that life, there are so many microcosms. There's work microcosms, there's friendship groups, but throughout all of this, you do need to stay grounded. And one way to do that is also to be kind. Be kind to others, be kind to yourself. Treating everyone with respect is really important to learn, especially going through high school. And don't give your time or attention to people that don't respect you or don't care about you, because there are many people out there and you can't make everyone happy.
Yeah.
You can't be liked by everyone. And so you need to take that approach of what is realistic, and make those genuine friends who will be from all walks of life, but who will be there throughout your tough times.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple of good points there, particularly about sort of the idea of groupthink and conforming. And for me, and I think a lot of other high school students, there's you just want to fit in, right? You want to be accepted amongst your peers, right? And I think you brought a good point about that's not always sort of beneficial, particularly when you're trying to sort of figure out where your passions and interests may lie, right? So I think that's a really, really good point you bring up there, Maya. And at the beginning of your answer, you talked about how you attended a private school, Winona School, I believe. And to date, I don't think we've had someone from a private school on the podcast. And as I was just mentioning to you a minute ago, like from someone who didn't go to a private school, and from the outside, it gets a bad rap, right? I think that's fair to say. Whether rightly or wrongly. So, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was sort of your private school experience. Obviously someone who went to a private school. What was your experience, like in private school? And can you speak to some of those sort of misconceptions that sort of surround, private schools?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely see after high school that this bubble bursts and you're suddenly in a world where people don't go to private school.
Yeah.
And so I'd just say I'm really grateful that my mum worked so hard to be able to put me through all those years, and he really did give me a lot of opportunities to do all those activities that I mentioned. So there are my experience was very positive, and I don't think I fully understood the whole private school structure and how it all worked, and who was the daughter of who until I left. Which was it was quite interesting to learn about as you develop and now step into the professional world. And so moving into that perspective of stereotypes, you can see, I think the most common stereotypes would be from like banking industries or legal industries as well. You look at the parents of children and who they are, maybe senior executives or CEOs of large companies. And there's that stereotype that comes out and says, "Oh, daddy got you that job."
Right.
And it's, well, yes, to an extent that you are better positioned at a young age in terms of professional networks, but it comes down to that individual to recognize their position of privilege. And I can say not many students understand this. I wish I understood that a bit more myself. And, it comes down to having gratitude and understanding your position, but reflecting on where you sit in the whole society as well. And so without a bit of gratitude, you don't understand that, these are people that will be your friends and that you will not form professional connections to them, but, they have possible networks that might be able to help you, whether that's in business or just in life. And so I think anyone can make it or, can succeed without having this starting point or wherever you started. It just takes planning and determination and grit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other stereotypes, but this is the main one.
Yeah, that's a good point you brought up there. And like this is not meant to be a political statement at all, but it's all good and well to be put in a position of opportunity, but at the end of the day, like the onus is on you as an individual to make the most of that. And for every person that might have succeeded in that given a particular set of circumstances, there might be 50 or 100 other people who didn't take advantage of those particular circumstances. So I think that's a really good point you bring up about essentially taking initiative and earning things based on merit. And I think that's something that, might have, been a big factor for you moving towards university and throughout your corporate and legal experiences. So Maya, obviously you attended that private school, Winona School, and I wanted to focus on sort of that transition to your university experience. Were you someone that, well, you mentioned already that you were quite open-minded. You were academically inclined, but that didn't define your story whatsoever. So moving to university, did you sort of have a clear idea of what you wanted to do and a clear idea of where your passions and interests lay? Or were you someone that was still trying to figure that part out?
I did not have a super clear idea. I don't think anyone does.
Hmm.
It's funny, it makes me think back to, I think, year 10, when everyone goes into a room with like a career counselor and you do those tests,
Yeah.
those aptitude tests of some sort, and say, based on what you like doing and your marks, I think you'd make a great engineer. And you'll be like, okay, I don't like engineering, but thanks for the opinion. And so beforehand, I actually wanted to be an architect like my mom. And that was what I, was aiming for originally, architecture. And there was also law. I'll talk about that later. But then I did some work experience in architecture during that year 10 work experience week. And I found out that's really not what I wanted to do. I love the designing aspect. I love the creativity, but the drafting did not suit me. So I wanted to explore some of the areas that I really did enjoy in high school, and that was, economics and mathematics, and also a bit of design thinking and writing. And I wanted to also give myself that optionality to really go and explore different careers. And I saw that Macquarie University had this great applied finance degree. And instead of, just doing a commerce and law degree, I wanted to go to Macquarie and really hone in on that finance and statistics side. And so I chose that because I believe that it did give me the most options to really drive my career and not be determined so much by market factors.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that is a good point you bring up about optionality and sort of giving yourself flexibility, right? Because a lot can change, over the course of a degree, right? You might go in thinking you're gonna have a particular job or position, and that might totally change by the time you finish your degree. So you touched on there that you studied law and applied finance at Macquarie University. I just wanted to get an understanding of sort of your experience, at the law school or the business school. What was your sort of approach, and were there some misconceptions that you had about law school or business school that turned out to be totally inaccurate and false, or was it sort of what you thought it would be?
So there definitely was a lot of statistics. That was a bit of a shock. No, it was basically everything that I thought it would be. Applied finance was a great mix of financial concepts with economics and statistics. And then the law side, I didn't do legal studies at school, but I did enjoy reading widely.
Right.
And law has been a big lesson in learning to consume a lot of information, being able to turn that into advice, and then also being able to communicate that back. And I think I heard someone saying, I don't know if it was on another podcast, that law, if you don't want to be a lawyer, don't do law. And I disagree with that, because law provides you with those frameworks of understanding how society is structured and understanding the policies behind, company policies, simple ones like work rights, and being able to know your own rights and where you stand on things. And that's incredibly important. It empowers yourself, empowers the people around you. And those skills are very, very difficult to otherwise gain. And so the law school puts you through that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really cool to hear your insights into some of the the principles and lessons you've learned by attending law school. It's not all about sort of the technical information. I sort of went in, in my own experience, I sort of went in thinking that, oh, okay, we're going to learn about the more substantive side of law, like, oh, where do you find this crime in this section and part of the act? But as you know, like you probably don't even remember anything you learned in your first like 4 years of law school or whatever. So it's less about the substantive side of law, but more about developing those skills and sort of principles which you touched on, which I think is really beneficial for students to hear as well. So I just wanted to ask Maya, on a more general point, based on your own experiences at law school and business school and you're at university more generally, what were some of the pieces of advice that really, helped you navigate that experience? And I suppose following on from that, what advice might you give to a early on university student in those first couple of years?
I love this question. Um, and because university is tough, it is one where you need to be organized and you need to develop an understanding of people that you might not have encountered before. So, in terms of excelling academically, I would say it starts with your mindset. There is no magic pill to make you study throughout the night and that will get you good grades. Don't do that. It all depends on who you choose to be around. And that's the fantastic thing about being out of high school. It's fine to be that person who says, please get degrees. But if you want to be a high achiever, then you shouldn't be around those people because they'll just make you feel embarrassed for wanting to pursue something more. And the difference between school and uni on that point is that marks at high school are tangible. You know that your ATAR will determine whether you can get into a course. But at uni, your marks are not tied to anything certain. So it's very tricky to keep that mindset of, yes, I want to keep working hard and getting good marks if you can't see that outcome of why you're doing it. And so, a number of like 5 HDs is not going to land you, is not going to guarantee you a job, right? And I think you need to start thinking about what is your bigger picture here and what's the mindset that you need to adopt. It's probably one that, you want to keep learning, you want to keep thinking practically. How am I going to apply, torts, for example, in the real world? And I know that's tough, especially with a ton of reading. But then that connects to the second point of meeting and learning from as many people as you can. Whether that's in your class or whether that's classmates who have done the subject before. Everyone who's gone through this, and there's thousands of students with you, one of them at least will be able to provide you some perspective on how this can be used in the real world.
Yeah, and like it's no secret that obviously you've excelled academically at university, but it's also refreshing to hear you talk about how you didn't sort of limit yourself in that capacity, and you didn't, getting good grades wasn't the defining factor of your degree. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and I definitely did early on as well. So, and I think the point you raised about the importance of marks and how it's not really tied to anything tangible. I think that's not really a bad thing in some respects, because it sort of gives students that freedom, I guess, and flexibility. Would you sort of agree with that statement?
Yeah, totally. I think what's most important is actually learning how to start, genuine conversations. And looking back at it, I don't remember torts very much, but I do remember the
Yeah.
friends that I've made in that class and the adventures that we've been on, the events that we attended at uni, and even playing pool after class during a very intense summer school. That those are the highlights if I had to reel it back in my mind. And so you are going to be tested on everything, personally. It's going to be very challenging. And so, you just need to get involved with everything that you can and be
Yeah.
kind to yourself and be kind to others. And if you can, go travel. I know
Yeah.
it's hard in COVID, but do it,
Whereabouts did you
go
travel?
go on exchange. I went first to Singapore for a summer entrepreneurship program.
Yeah.
That was an amazing, very intense 2 weeks, and followed by some other, travel around Singapore. And that was amazing. I'd never been out of Australia by myself and met so many people from Singapore. Just love the culture. Go on, ramble
Yeah.
about that. But the next
100%.
one was
Mm.
to Malaysia. That was actually for a leadership symposium, and spent a week there actually learning about humanitarian affairs and what organizations are doing to work towards the sustainable development goals. So that was quite amazing.
And are these all through Macquarie University, or are these like things that you did and applied for on your own, or how did that come about?
So the first one to NUS was through the incubator at Macquarie University.
Right.
And then the second one was by scholarship with the Macquarie Business School.
Okay. Okay. So they are sort of associated with your university experience. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you mentioned there just a few minutes ago about trying to expose yourself to as many things as possible. And one of the things that you did at university was join the Macquarie University Women Entering Business Society. You've been involved with the society for in a couple of capacities, including as president and chairperson. So for potentially a Macquarie University female student early on in their degree, what sort of things does Web offer, and how can that student benefit from joining that society?
Yeah, definitely. Web is really close to my heart, and not only just because I'm a female, but I had that experience working, trying to enter the finance industry, and that's when I saw how people were thinking and that needed to change. And if that didn't change, not many women are going to be able to enter the same industry. And so Web provides that community and those resources to help female students just realize their aspirations in, any field of business. And we recognize that there are still glass ceilings that need to be broken. And we work with companies to actually help that and make female candidates be able to enter those industries that they want to. So there's a very pervasive issue of gender inequality that stems through still all the industries. So we provide that really valuable network and have those important conversations with male and female peers. And personally, I didn't just step into president or chairwoman, but I actually started out in a finance society, and I organized one event for women in finance and could see how that room shifted their conversations, and it was so powerful. I could see that women were starting to see other role models, and they didn't think that it was possible before, or they didn't think that they could get there. And from that point, that became one of the core values of who I am, and the causes that I will forever want to contribute to.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about the point of sort of visibility and sort of seeing people who look like you, basically in careers that you might want to be in or positions you might want to be in. Is that a big part, about web and I suppose your like perspective more generally? Is a big part of it like seeing women in finance and having that sort of like group around you, or is it something? Am I totally off there?
Yeah, on the right track.
Yeah,
It's not just seeing women, but it's just having that support and
yeah,
community.
yeah.
We talk about, like, I'm not involved in the society activity anymore, but I'm very close friends with, the executives who are leading that now, and
Mm,
we have our own roundtables, and we talk about everything from work to managing work and life.
yeah,
And I don't think without those conversations that just simple questions of, oh, should I be asking for a promotion, or how do I manage this situation at work, can be, they need to be open, they need to be discussed, and
yeah.
it's a platform to do that.
100%. And, obviously, the society provides a lot of opportunities for students to, network, develop their skills through a range of workshops, competitions, etc. And a big part of web from the outside looking in is sort of the sponsorships and the partnerships you create with, some of those big sort of financial corporations. So Maya, I just wanted to ask, like, through those events, I'm sure you were exposed to a lot of sort of inspirational female leaders in business and finance. Um, what were some of the key like sort of lessons you might have learned, from those people? Was there anything in particular that stood out to you?
Yeah, so very, grateful to have crossed paths with so many influential leaders.
Mm,
And our key events would be, like International Women's Day breakfast, where we did inter-society breakfast with the other female societies from UNSW, Sydney Uni, etc. And from that you can see that what we're talking about, let's say the balance or gender equality, it's not just a woman's issue, it's a business issue.
right.
And women don't lack motivation, they don't lack the skills or the experience, but they do lack opportunities and supporting workplace policies.
Mm,
And that goes to the heart of the structural change that many organizations are, yet to implement. And so, I've learned particularly that you need to be your own role model.
mm,
And that's not just for women, but that's anybody. You have the confidence, but if you don't build those important relationships around you and have the support of the people, then it's very hard to succeed further, because sometimes it takes guts to do things.
yeah,
And let's say that's asking for a raise, or sending a feedback email can
yeah,
be a bit scary if you're a junior. So there is no secret magic. It's just that a lot of organizations need to realize that there is a lot of benefit in having diversity, not just of gender, but of thought.
yeah, 100%. And Maya, like you mentioned there that I suppose that the society is sort of helping, female students, enter the business and finance, industry. And, you've done that yourself through a couple of, corporate experiences, whether it be, an internship at PwC or in your current, well, not your current, but your former position at Bank of America. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about, those corporate experiences and what it was like sort of entering that big, scary world of finance and business.
So my first experience was at PwC,
Yeah.
and before that, I didn't have any other experience on the applied finance side of my degree. So I really wanted to go out and experience what it'd be like. Firstly, at one of those big four companies,
Mm,
and then secondly, working on like working on multinational company issues, like those big commercial matters, which really impact a lot, like in terms of the people who are involved, but also, the world. Like this is, it's far bigger than, your boutique law firm.
Right.
And so I really asked for, a lot of insights from the people that I met through those networking events. I did as many insight programs as I could. And I really was able to set myself up to, move into the corporate tax team there for the summer. And through that, I could see exactly how people broke down those issues from, tax to legal structures, and how the whole team just needed to help and work on one little problem on that whole space. And so from there, I found that I really enjoyed the people. I really enjoyed working with in a large organization, but I didn't particularly enjoy the type of work that I did.
Right.
And so that led me to apply for more roles in the finance space, more like global markets, investment banking, and equities. And, I went through so many of those firm presentations that I knew, okay, I didn't want to do equities, I didn't want to do global markets, but everything that I enjoy doing, like all the strategy work or the leadership and teamwork and analysis, was really centered around that investment banking industry. And so, I applied for Bank of America and went through some, tough but good interviews, and landed myself that summer internship.
Yeah, both of those opportunities at PwC and Bank of America were internships. So I wanted to ask just a broader point of internships, like, a few of the conversations I've been having, a few guests have brought up the fact that as a young university intern, you sort of think that you have to have so much experience, technical skill, have to have the best grades to sort of work at these companies through internships. Like, I'm just curious about your approach to that internship experiences. What was your sort of approach in that respect? Did you think that you had to have a lot of technical skill, or is it more about sort of the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, things of that nature?
Well, it's a tricky question because it's very double-sided. Like, you need to have a level of skill and knowledge in order to be able to apply, but also they say that, they don't expect much from you.
Yeah.
And you don't know where you stand on that. So I guess from what I have experienced, you do need a level of competency to be able to fit the role of like investment banker or law clerk. But it really just comes down to what you can do to build those foundations, aside from, just studying. Because luckily we're in an era where we have access to a lot of information online and a lot of courses. And before the investment banking application process, I went online and I did a couple of courses through Forage, which is, that online practical learning platform. And I broke down, I think, the valuation of Apple and of Tiffany, and could actually use those hard technical skills, even though, it wasn't like an internship or a program that I could get a proper certificate for, but it was something that I could really speak to in the interviews. And so I was able to use that to highlight my eagerness to learn, be able to find out the solution to problems, which, if you don't have like a mergers and acquisitions case study in your degree, well, nothing's stopping you from going out and reading the news and doing one yourself, or doing a project, or
Right.
starting a blog about it, and yes, then there's that soft skills side of it, which is extremely important because that carries on over to any industry. So like building up your communication and teamwork, and particularly commercial awareness.
Yeah, 100%. So I suppose on one hand, you have a lot of you have a few corporate and financial experiences. And on the other hand, more recently, you're sort of gaining more experience in the field of law, right? You sort of had a couple of positions as like paralegal, like clerk type positions. So I just wanted to know, for those that don't know, where exactly have you worked? What sort of things have you been doing? And just tell us about those opportunities more generally.
Particularly in the law industry, or just everything?
Specifically the law side of things.
Yeah, sure. So I have been working in a boutique law firm for 3 years, and we focus on, family, wills and estates, commercial matters like leases, and I'm paralegal there. And, it's a great experience working in a smaller size firm because you actually get carriage over matters. So I've had the opportunity to, draft court documents and understand the process of like serving, of addressing clients, and the importance of that first interaction, which is, I heard that a lot of students who choose to go for the big 6 firms don't get that exposure until further down the track. So that's one way that students might be able to address that, technical skills gap. And then I also started working in an IP law firm as well, focusing on IP and litigation matters. And that's fairly technical in terms of intellectual property. And
just on the back of those experiences, in a few of our previous conversations as well, we've sort of touched on the difficulties it is to actually land that sort of first legal opportunity. I know for me, in my own experience, I think I mentioned in a previous interview as well, that I was working for free for like 8, 9, 10 months, right? Obviously, you want to get paid for work, right? But I think volunteer opportunities is a way for law students particularly to get their foot in the door. At least that was my own experience. So, did you have a similar experience in trying to get that first opportunity? Was it difficult, or did you get a job on your first application? What was that sort of experience like?
Yeah. Oh, there's this running joke that you need like 5 years of experience in order to get that entry-level job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I started looking for work experience around, I think, middle of my second year. And, I looked at my resume and I said, okay, there's a ton of stuff here. I've got, a ton of competitions with the Law Society. Like I did negotiations, client interview, but it wasn't enough to compete with, students who have been in their 4th year and, worked at a couple of firms before. And I basically needed to, this time, how I mentioned about the importance of building genuine connections, I needed to reach out to those friends and, previous colleagues and mentors that I had. And I told them, I would like to gain some work experience. And, I had to ask, and it's not something that, maybe younger students are used to, like asking for help. And, it was really great that I was able to intern as well part-time in a law firm in the city, also unpaid. But, you get to work with some great solicitors, and from that understand, some of the things like how to lodge court documents and how do files work, not not just the arbitrary, like, tell me what are the elements of
Yeah,
you
the
know,
contract. Yeah,
this and that.
100%. And yeah, as we sort of touched on a few times, it's less about the sort of technical and substantive skills, but more about the connections you've made, and by the sounds of it, you're able to leverage those connections to create opportunities for yourself, which is really cool to hear. Maya, I wanted to sort of pivot a little bit and change paces and talk about your interest and passion for entrepreneurship and design thinking. Um, Obviously, that's something that you're really passionate about, and you've had a couple of experiences in that space in Singapore and at the Macquarie University Business School. So I was just wondering if you could tell us about where that passion came from. Have you always been passionate about that space? Were there some defining experiences along the way? What's your experience been like in that respect?
Yeah, so my passion for this space came about looking at different startups, and also, having a long kind of seeded desire to want to design things for global good. I remember doing some random Wix website when I was in year 9, and I thought this is going to be a great idea. Still there. um, but, then I moved into this corporate world, and there's a misconception that profit and sustainability is mutually exclusive, and you can't do much for the environment unless you're out there hugging trees or going on boats and saving whales. But this podcast really explores the different areas of sustainability, ESG, and climate finance in relation to financial markets and economics. So it's very relevant for young professionals and students who actually
Right.
want to understand how their work can already intersect with these areas of helping our planet and being sustainable. Basically making sure that our future does not die, and that our kids will have a home and a place to live that is green.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
Greenfluence is more than the podcast. It's really a community, and a community of professionals who are empowered to actually create change within their organizations. And we explore all these niches of impact investing, circular economy, and proving that that we all can do something better for the world.
Yeah, and to be specific with Greenfluence, what sort of like content are you producing? Is it so? Obviously, as we mentioned, you co-created it with Vis. Is it you two having a discussion? Are you bringing on guests? What can listeners expect from Greenfluence, moving forward?
Yeah, well, we are not prophets in this area, and so it's important to be able to hear expertise from our guests that we're bringing on from non-profits, but also peers. So there is a wide range of perspectives, and not everyone knows everything about all the areas, and so
Right.
we are really just cracking down on the misconceptions around what all these areas are, like ESG, and exploring the different niches, because there are so many.
Yeah, 100%. And it gets me thinking of something you said, like would have been half an hour ago, and you talked about how in our society today there's an abundance of information, and um, everything is really accessible now. There's a lot of accessible resources. So I was wondering, does that sort of principle apply to why you and Viz created this podcast, to increase access to the wealth of information that all these different people in finance or ESG have? Was that a part of the motivation, or am I way off there?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah,
Definitely,
yeah,
because this area is really it's evolving still,
yeah,
and it's a very clouded area of what is sustainability, or
yeah,
how does climate finance work.
yeah.
And we wanted to just create those connections between the information and
Yeah.
connections between people.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's sort of one of the reasons why I started, my own podcast as well, is to, give people that, real life, practical experiences. I think, in one of the emails I sent to you with some sample questions, one of them was specific about, starting Greenfuence, the project. And I think, with my conversation with Vis a few days ago, we talked about how, you often hear of, a podcast or a project or a startup, down the line when it's really successful, whether it be 2, 3, 4 years down the line. But, we're in quite a unique position in that we get to speak to someone who's, living that experience of getting their project up and running. So, give our listeners an insight into, what it's like actually creating Greenfuence. Obviously, it's in its very, very early stages. You've recorded a couple of interviews to date. Has it been a challenging process? Was it easy? What's that experience been like in that initial establishment phase?
Yeah, it's definitely been a crash course in learning
Yeah.
about podcasting and about creating communities. Because yeah, I have not really touched like a microphone or a video editing software before.
Yeah.
But it's less so of the the technical skills, which we are upskilling on. But it's more, I found that the challenges were, how do we channel these ideas and passions into an understandable stream, or um, a, a medium that we can communicate easily to people, because it goes to the point about everyone has different passions for this area. And I think that, like, young professionals particularly, who will then eventually move up into those positions of manager and executives, are in the best position to enforce structural change. And so identifying the people for this community particularly has been quite tricky, and understanding how we can build it that will actually create some change. And so we're thinking about those, creating our own educational courses and playbooks and things that are practical. So yes, it has been a challenge. Like, ideas are fun to throw around, and to you have so many, but then you start, and then you go, okay, this has to keep going. Like, you've got to push past, I think, the 20 hours in the beginning to keep something up. And so I think we'll just see, as time evolves, this project will also evolve.
Yeah.
So
And speaking
come back to me in a week or so.
I think Vis actually said the exact same thing. Come back to me down the line. Like you mentioned there about the project evolving. So initially it's obviously a podcast. But you guys were talking, I think we had a group call, all three of us, and you were talking about how you want to sort of expand it and build a community of resources. I was wondering if you could just speak a bit about, what Greenfuence is and what it offers its community members.
Yeah, sure. So it's basically the idea of having a community of professionals from all different walks of life, learning about how they can intersect their work with a cause that they are passionate and will go towards, helping the planet and enabling a better future for us. And so some of the details haven't been written out yet, but they are definitely we already speak to lots of people individually. Like, we tag each other in links on LinkedIn all the time, and you'll probably see it pop up, like, check out this report.
Yeah.
And there should, we were thinking, let's make this a structural way to spread this information and actually encourage debate, because we're always on calls and with people from this community already. And the most powerful thing is to have people in force together.
Yeah. And as a uni student, and obviously this is recently graduated, you guys co-created this project together. And obviously I'm a university student as well, and I started this project while I was at university as well. And a lot of the people who I've interviewed have started, some sort of, passion project, themselves as a university student, even if it wasn't their intention to, build this thing up to pursue in the long term. So I was just wondering, would you encourage other students, to, pick a pick something that they're particularly passionate about, it's a tongue twister, and turn that into some sort of project? And do you think that being a student gives them, a great opportunity, to pursue that project, given that we have so much time, we don't have that much commitment, we don't have a family, we don't have, mortgage, this, that, and the other? Is there something about being a student that lends itself to creating these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And like to add on to all that, you've got the possibility to fail in a safe environment. You
Yeah.
like if you imagine this is your life. I don't know. Sorry for the people listening, you can't see this, but this is your life.
Hmm.
This is your school. This is your university. And looking at that, maybe this is your time on, like this year. And so, in the grand scheme of things, that safety net of being a student, like, will enable you to test and trial and explore interests which you might not have known before. It's like expecting a person to pick up a tennis ball and then say, oh, he's going to be a future tennis player. Like, you have to try as much as you can. And that includes, going out and practicing execution. And I think that's one of the toughest things,
Yeah.
executing on your ideas, on, your plans. Like, you're going to study now. All right, let's do it. Right. So this time when you have a little bit more time and, information is out there, and you can explore different areas. But, the real reason why I think starting projects like this is so important is because it goes back to your identity capital.
Right.
Yes, it helps with a resume and everything else, but it enables you to, demonstrate who you are. For me, this has not been like a prominent passion which I was saying to everyone, but it's always been, wanting to do something bigger than myself, and and bringing people together in force. And if you have the time, if you've got an area that you want to explore, like writing, learning how to code, or doing an app, or a side hustle, or a business, now is the time.
Now's the time. Yeah, that's a great message. I think that a lot of students would benefit from hearing. Maya, as we draw to the end of our time together, I wanted to touch on one thing that you flagged to me prior to the interview, which is about like the idea that or the misconception that corporate careers and sort of startup interests can't be compatible with each other. I just want to get your perspective on that. Are they both mutually exclusive? Can they be joined together? Where do you sort of stand on that point?
Yeah, they are very different worlds.
Right.
As much as I try to want to work in both, there's a reason why startups are smaller. They are focused on high growth and on taking on an enormous amount of risk, versus your traditional corporate or law firm, bank. But I think that all students will benefit a lot by learning about entrepreneurship, even if they want to go into a corporate career, because of the thinking of thinking fast, of working in different teams and different projects. And I really am drawn to the idea of entrepreneurship, which is applying entrepreneurship but inside a corporation. And there are ways to still explore, your interests in startups. For myself, like I still go to all the pitch nights, or the startup events, and even looking to make some angel investments in the future. But that's, a world which I know that I need to gain some skills in the corporate world first, before thinking about possibilities in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, yeah, I haven't been exposed to the idea of entrepreneurship previously, but you mentioned a great point there about, pursuing entrepreneurship doesn't mean that, you have to create your own business and, sign your life up to entrepreneurship in the future. Because I had a conversation with someone yesterday, who will also be on the podcast, and they said pretty much the exact same thing. She's actually created a couple of businesses, and she encourages students to pursue entrepreneurship, even if they don't see themselves in that field, long term, because it teaches you so much, about the world around you. But as you quite rightly mentioned, it teaches you so much about yourself as well. And I think that sort of encapsulates a broader theme about this conversation, which was, the idea you've mentioned a couple times, which is identity capital, and sort of finding, creating your identity and figuring out sort of where your skills and interests lie. And she mentioned that on that interview yesterday, and I think that's something that is prominent throughout this interview as well, Maya. So Maya, we're pretty much out of time. It's 2 minutes to midday. And it is a sunny Sunday afternoon, so I want to get you out of here to enjoy it. But Maya, just in closing, I just wanted to ask, like, you might have already mentioned it previously, but was there any sort of final piece of advice, tip, or guidance which you'd really want to get across to someone who might be in the later high school years or early university years? And if you haven't already said it, what piece of advice would that be?
Well, it goes towards the ongoing theme of
Yeah.
learning and your mindset,
Mhm.
and making genuine connections, because you have a limited amount of time in the day, and the best way to learn is actually through speaking to people. And that means you can also try a lot of things and discover interests in many areas of life. So that has been probably the most eye-opening decision for me in terms of, you know, what my mindset was after school, to how I got here today.